And the presentation today that we're going to talk about is, the topic we're going to talk about is empowering innovation for purpose and profit. So something very interesting for all of us, and something that we can apply in our everyday lives, to be very honest with you. Before, but before we dive in, I'd like David, Mr. David Jackson Groves, who is the president of AIESEC Alumni Asia Pacific, to give a small welcome message. Over to you, David.
Hi. Thank you. Hi, everybody. And it's just always a thrill to be here. And so I don't forget later on, thank you so much, Gaurav, and also to Stefan for helping organize this and really driving this event every month. It's a funny thing. I reached out to Dale a little while ago, and just to demonstrate that regardless of where we are in our careers and our life and our ages, we're all very equal. And Dale, obviously with a smile on his face, replied, "Hello, hello, my president." The fact is, I haven't seen Dale since around 1981 or 2. And I guess it's a reminder for us all, what we're trying to do here is really build a community, being the alumni of AIESEC. But it's more than that. This is a global movement. And as I've said before, it starts when you join AIESEC. We transition into the second chapter when we go into the alumni, and it doesn't finish till we die. The fact is, we all share certain things, certain values, certain purpose, and which is also why when I was asked to suggest a topic for tonight, it was a no-brainer. It had to be something that combined innovation, which I know is Dale's passion, and purpose, which we've talked about in these events before. So I'll pass it back to Gaurav to go through a few more details, but I just want to say thank you so much, Dale, in advance for your presentation. It's really a thrill to have you here. We know your time is precious. And just looking in the chat already, just remember also, we had over 150 registrations, and many people, because of the time zones, sign up to get the recordings, and the recordings live on forever. And we'll mention where they are in a minute. But to have even in the room, by last count, I think we've got to have at least 15 or 16 countries represented, which is just extraordinary. So once again, welcome everybody. It's a thrill to have you here. And thank you so much, Dale. Back to you, Gaurav.
Awesome. Yes, we're very, very excited for this talk. Before I hand it over to Dale, of course, I want to go through some things. Of course, expectations: be engaged, participate enthusiastically, try and keep your camera on as much as you can, so that we have that little bit of personal communication, even though we're not, sitting in person. Of course, mute yourself when you're not speaking, and unmute yourself when you want to say something. Ask questions in the chat box. So we have Stefan over here, who's part of the management team as well, and he'll go through the chat box and kind of speak up or ask questions when he thinks is probably right at the time. If you do want to speak or ask questions like in the middle of the chat, I'm pretty sure Dale is open to you coming in and asking something or trying to understand what he just said. So keep it as conversational as possible. If you want to, you're more than welcome to ask questions again whenever you want to. But those are sort of our expectations for today. Moving into the agenda, we have a very simple agenda. Of course, we have our introduction, which we just went through, and part of the introductions also I'll introduce Dale as well, and I have a lot to talk about him. He has done so many things that don't want to get anything wrong. But yeah, it's a great CV nonetheless. Of course, Dale will go through his presentation. We'll have a Q&A space, and there will be a link for all of you to give feedback if you wish to give feedback, and it'd be really nice for us to see where we can improve. Okay, awesome. So some announcements. We did, we're conducting our A-Talk right now. We had some national AIESEC Alumni Association leaders come for the A-Talk training. So an A-Talk they could host in their own entity or in their own nation. We're hosting it as part of Asia Pacific, of course. So I do want to shout out to Mongolia, to New Zealand, and if I'm not mistaken, Kyrgyzstan. I hope I've gotten that right. So these countries came to the A-Talk training yesterday. So big shout out to them. Our next regional A-Talk, of course, will be on the 21st of February. We'll send you the details and the link to sign up for that, in the coming week. So please be sure to mark that date in your calendar. We have a YouTube channel where we post all the recordings. So if you want to, look up our YouTube channel or look at the previous recordings, previous speakers, go to bit.ly/AAAP YouTube. Make sure you get the link right because it is case sensitive. And lastly, we have a management team for the A Talks that we run. I'm part of the management team as well that runs the A Talks. We are recruiting for some people. So if you do wish to, join our team and be part of this cool speaker series, more than welcome to message me or message David or message Stefan, and we'll take it forward from there. Awesome. So these are the announcements. This is the housekeeping's done. Let's get into it. Let me talk a little bit about Dale, and we can have Dale take the presentation forward then. And I'm going to read this out because this is a fantastic scene. I'm not even joking. This is super cool what Dale's done. So he began his professional career first at AWT International Trade and Finance Corp in Vienna in 1984. From 1989 to 1991, he was Deputy General Manager of AWT's Asian joint venture in Hong Kong, covering Greater China and South Korea. In 1991, he joined Siemens as the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer of the company's Hungarian telecom business. From 1995, he was the CFO of Siemens RT, the entity representing all of Siemens businesses in Hungary. Between 2000 and 2010, he was seconded as CFO to Siemens subsidiaries in Japan and Slovakia, returning to Hungary as president and CEO of Siemens ZRT in 2010. So great CV, and this is just the beginning. Between 2013 and 2019, he was elected president of the German-Hungarian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and continues to serve on its board, until today. In 2015, and it's very cool. In 2015, he received the Officer's Cross of the Hungarian Order of Merit for strengthening Hungarian and German economic relations, and contributing to the development of the Hungarian economy, which I think is really, really cool. I mean, it's not just for, a company that he's done such great things. It's also for the nation and for cross-border relations as well. He was also recently awarded the Grand Decoration for Services to the Republic of Austria and became an honorary citizen of the Budapest Technical University. Throughout his career, Dale Martin has actively engaged in promoting innovation, education, and sustainability, and we'll clearly see those things coming up in today's presentation. The most visible evidence of his environmentally friendly initiatives is the 5,000 m2 green roof, 5,000 meter square green roof of Siemens headquarters in Budapest, which he personally initiated in '94, which I think is really, really cool. His active commitment to education at blue collar as well as university level has a 25-year history, which led to the opening of the Siemens Vocational Training Center in Budapest in 2014. Strengthening innovation was and remains close to his heart. The most high-flying success was establishing an R&D entity for the development of an electric aircraft at Siemens Hungary, which was subsequently then sold to Rolls-Royce in 2019. Part of his AIESEC career, he joined AIESEC in 1978 in Vienna, in Austria, and is one of the founding members of AIESEC Alumni International in 1986. So you can see he has fantastic CV. One of the things I mentioned in his CV was talking about the development of an electric aircraft. That is part of his, is close to his heart, and of course it's part of the innovation side of things. And before I let him speak, I'd like to show you guys a quick video of his innovation.
Siemens Electric Aircraft has developed a complete electric propulsion unit, including a battery system for aircraft application. The Hungarian aircraft manufacturer Magnus has already equipped the second aircraft fusion with our electric propulsion unit.
And this is why we were able to do the first ever, globally first ever formation flight of two identical electric aircraft. I'm very proud to be part of this today, and I'm very proud that this is happening here in Hungary. Siemens Hungary has developed this whole system together, naturally, with its colleagues in Germany and a Hungarian company called Magnus. And this is a big step forward in electric aviation. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
Awesome. So yes, that was his video, and that was him talking about the electric plane. I'll let Mr. Dale Martin take it forward from here.
So thank you very much. I wanted to say good evening, my fellow AIESECers, because I thought this was focused in Asia Pacific, but I saw that also quite a few are here from Europe. So this just shows that AIESEC alumni are all over the place, and they even link into Asia Pacific presentations here. So hello to all of you. Yes, AIESEC is still close to my heart. And how should I say, I believe Miyoshi-sama is also here, a Japanese gentleman I met 25 years ago in Prague. And then when we went to Japan 20 years ago, they were really wonderful in helping us to get to know Japan. Or maybe another quite important element in my life, that actually I met my wife through an AIESECer who had a girlfriend at the time, his wife now, and this girlfriend became so my wife. So I am emotionally attached to AIESEC, if you so wish. So it's a genuine honor to have been asked to share a few thoughts with you about empowering innovation for purpose and profit. To be frank, when I first saw this title, which, as you heard, David dreamt up, I didn't like it that much because I'm not so comfortable with the expression profit. Therefore, I would like to start with the more or less uncomfortable part and structure my thoughts first with profit, then around innovation, and by last but not by no means least, around purpose. So when I grew up in Austria in the 70s, I was in my late teens and early 20s. Profit was not really a very popular expression or category in Europe. Austria, especially at that time, was a socially relatively well-balanced, socially aware, or if you so wish, to a certain extent, even a socialist country. Profit in those days was regarded as something which should not be maximized, since the well-being of the society was, I would say, equally important, or maybe even more important. Just as an example, Siemens, the company I've been working for the past 30 years, was also at the time absolutely expected to play a social role and not really only to maximize profit. The question of due and undue profit is something which I brought up here now, which is eternally challenging. A relatively recent example of this is that Apple refused to pay licensing fees to Qualcomm and argued that they were just too high. And interestingly, after several years of litigation, they had to ultimately give in. I think it's also just a little philosophic aspect to differentiate between excessive and undeserved profit. But this is not, I don't want to go that far. But I would like to mention that in the light of the challenges of COVID, which COVID forced upon our societies, now the question whether corporate profit should have prevalence over other aspects, such as generating jobs, keeping jobs, supporting employees, has been more in the forefront again, definitely in several countries here in Europe. So to start out with, I would like to explain why I believe that profit is fundamentally important. I think to most of you, this is completely obvious. Because you, and I'm talking more about Asia Pacific, live in a traditionally capitalist environment. And of course, that most of you will be considerably younger than I. I'm mentioning this because the emphasis on profit and stakeholder value has developed significantly over the past 30 years. So why then is profit such an important way to gauge a company, an enterprise, or an undertaking? Well, to my mind, now we can go to the next slide, Gaurav, please. Yeah, this is where we were here now. Profit is something a little bit similar to a thermometer. Yeah, I think profit is a very good health indicator of any commercial activity. It is certainly not sufficient in itself. And perhaps somewhat like this thermometer, it reflects an underlying state of health, to my mind, quite well. As we have also seen now during COVID, possibly the thermometer was one of the main instruments to gauge general health. And if anyone has higher temperature, he or she is singled out and requested to go through further checks. So, and by healthy, I don't mean just profitability. Profitability shows how competitive you are, and you can also check how profitable you are. Well, no, there's an important thought. I think profitability over the longer term, and I repeat, longer term is really the thing which you have to look at. And it also shows not only your absolute state of health, but also your relative one. Because if your goods and services are valued higher than those of your competitors, that is, of course, an excellent thing. Or if your profitability is good, then it shows, if it's higher, then it also shows maybe that your goods and services are maybe at the same level, but that your cost position is a lot better. So here, there's also a major difference, in this case, between profitability and stock market valuation. But I don't want to go into this now. This is a very different subject. So to sum it up, long-term profitability says something meaningful not only about your absolute health, but also your relative positioning among your competitors. And this is why that is a very valuable way of gauging your health. Okay, now we now move on to innovation, please. Yeah. Here again, some general introductory thoughts. Invention versus innovation. Innovation is creativity. It is exciting and it can be really fun. But innovation can also be really challenging, disappointing, and even downhearting. Sometimes there are wonderful moments, as you saw in the short video, which is on YouTube. Very rarely, reality supersedes your dreams. And not only better than you had expected, but better than your dreams. And this was the case in this little story. But before I go into this rather personal story, I would like to briefly differentiate between invention and innovation. Naturally, the line between these two is somewhat blurred, but for an argument's sake, an invention is something which is something really new, which hasn't existed before, possibly even to the extent that you can receive a patent for it. Innovation is more a combination of existing elements. And in such a way, the result of innovation is something which is better, more user-friendly, more cost-efficient, or let's say more energy efficient. Again, an example which most of you won't even know is that Siemens, and sorry for emphasizing Siemens, but 30 years do have an imprint on my life, yeah. Siemens was the first company to introduce a color display on a mobile phone. Yeah, well, that was back in 1997. And most of you won't even know that Siemens was at the forefront of mobile phone technology some 30 years ago, and exited the mobile phone market already in 2005. So it just shows that being first in an innovation is not necessarily good enough to stay afloat. But it just combined an invention from the late 60s and 70s, color LCD, it was at the time, and combined it with a mobile phone in the late 90s. And that, at the time, it was an interesting differentiator. Good. Coming to something interesting, I trust that the little story here, the story of electric aircraft within Siemens, I would like to tell more about this, and emphasizing especially what we did in Hungary, because most of it, from my viewpoint, started out in Hungary. And we had also a base in Germany supporting us. Interestingly, I think there are two beginnings of this story. And when they were combined, they became a powerful force. So the first beginning was a rather rational one. For me, it was obvious that Hungary offered and still offers good opportunities for innovation with a motivated workforce, which is rather well educated. The legal ecosystem also allows relative freedom and flexibility, as unlike some other countries in Europe, it is not unreasonably restricted by unions. Thus, there was a clear interest and willingness on my side to go beyond the activities which Siemens Hungary comprised at the time. We had, or still have, two factories manufacturing transformers and things, components for big electricity generation. So we have the largest software house in Hungary with 1,500 colleagues, normal sales and service operations. And what you thankfully already mentioned, Gorev, I also had initiated earlier and strongly believe in the vocational training system and also a vocational training school. So, but now comes the challenging part. In our case, as a subsidiary of Siemens, in order to innovate, you need an entity, a partner willing to provide you with support, headcount, and to some extent, of course, also money. Money is crystalline interest, as I like to say, but in this case, it is far more than money because you need approval and, of course, the support. So as a partner is absolutely necessary, I invited the worldwide head of technology of Siemens at the time to Hungary. This in itself wasn't that self-evident, as Siemens had at the time almost 400,000 employees worldwide, and Hungary's contribution to the worldwide turnover was less than 0.5%. So, I mean, we're definitely not in the forefront as one of the most interesting and relevant countries. So, in fact, the gentleman was not all enthused about setting up something in Hungary, as our corporate technology organization had several small groups around the world, which needed actually consolidation more than expansion. So I invited the global CTO, Chief Technology Officer, to Hungary in the summer of 2011, and he came in May 2012. So that's also 9 months later. In March, he came in March. And then I arranged for a dinner with the rector of the technical university and the dean of its largest faculty. In preparation, I had asked both sides to consider the topics which they were interested in which the university had abilities and the resources. Maybe here I would also yet add, of course, we had a relationship with the university, but honestly speaking, it was more a little bit tax-driven at the time, because we were able to give some monies which we could then write off because the system was that way, which changed, which also forced me to do something. But there was no meaningful cooperation, because when Siemens asked the university, what can you offer us? They said, well, we have everything because we are a university. And when the university asked us, what do you have? What would you like? I said, Siemens said, well, we need everything because we are just such a large company that we can use everything. And everything that doesn't match. So we had focused it to 3 and 3, and the result of this dinner was special electric inverters. At the time, I asked for a project manager from Siemens in Germany, someone who would actively drive this topic together with the university and ourselves. And a competent and supportive gentleman was nominated. But here the story takes a different turn. The gentleman who was nominated was undoubtedly qualified, because he decided to leave Siemens to become a university professor at a university in Germany, and therefore he handed this project down to someone else. And this person was far more junior and not interested, or I would say not really interested, in strengthening the Hungarian side. But he was rather interested in learning from the Hungarians, and then he could present this knowledge to his superiors more or less as his own achievement. So now the Hungarian colleagues whom we had hired, most of them still students themselves, were perceived more as a threat to the established engineering colleagues in Germany, as the Hungarian setup was very young, fully motivated, and honestly speaking, had a much better cost position as well. And from there, it was really very, very difficult. And what happened while stumbling on in the so-called Valley of Death, you know, these graphs of startups where it goes up and then you have this Valley of Death. So we felt that. So the Hungarian colleagues, and even I felt that. And this low end was in, December 2013. And now we have the other beginning. The other beginning was that this electric aircraft story started with truly a coincidence. A Siemens colleague, you saw him on the little video, this is Dr. Frank, whom I had met 15 years earlier, and with whom I hadn't been really in contact since then. I mean, just like with David, we hadn't been in touch for 2 decades, 3 decades, something like that. He had heard that I was in Hungary. This was in early 2014. And he sent me an email. And in response, I invited him to come to Hungary, because this is always good if people come here and can see and feel what is happening here. And rather unexpectedly, he confirmed, because one of the factories he was in charge of was in Serbia, very close to the Hungarian border. So this is also a nice coincidence, because as I mentioned before, Hungary is not in the global so prominently within Siemens just because of its size and the size of its market. It's not in the forefront. So this gentleman, I mean, his name is Dr. Frank, had been in research and innovation within the healthcare sector, which was the business I had been in charge of as a CFO when I was in Japan, when we originally met. And then you can now see, yes, I do like dinners, yeah. So I invited him for dinner, hoping that we could have an interesting exchange, together with the 2 colleagues from Siemens Hungary, who were heading this little group with the inverters, which I had described previously, where we were just going through this valley of death because we weren't really being seen as something so positive from the German side. Well, coincidentally, we had dinner at the very same table where I had arranged the dinner with the university rector and the CTO 2 years earlier. And then the following happened. This Dr. Frank, he's the pilot in the short video, described, among other things, that he even held a patent for a special electric motor, which he wanted to put into an aircraft, because he's an avid aviator. And he explained a characteristic of this motor by sketching this in the air. And then he mentioned also that something was missing, which required further development. And at that point, one of my colleagues looked at him and twisted somehow his wrist and said, well, did you ever try doing it this way? You know, and that was the moment when you could see, when these 2 gentlemen looked at each other, you could see that they understood each other, and all of us felt that there was something special in the air. So the story behind this is that this Hungarian colleague had previously worked in the development for electric airplanes with a small Hungarian company, which then couldn't continue its operations. So he was doing that before he joined Siemens, and therefore he was fully prepared for this challenge. And only 2 years later, the maiden flight featuring our own motor, our full drivetrain, including the battery system, took off from a Hungarian airfield in April 2016. And even better, at the time, we learned that concurrently Siemens had concluded an agreement with Airbus to jointly develop electric propulsion for aircraft. And now we in Hungary were suddenly no longer a threat to the German colleagues. We were suddenly part of the solution and not part of the problem. And we were also able to identify sufficiently skilled colleagues and ramp up within a relatively short time. So all of this was beautiful. Soaring ideas and chance encounters come together and enabled us to become an integral part of the next big milestone in that industry, the electrification of air transport. The video you saw was taken in September 2017. So, unfortunately, then almost 8 months later, and it was May 31st, 2018, there was a tragic event. During one of the many training flights, human error caused the plane to crash, killing both the pilot and the trainee. This was really traumatic in the deepest sense. Also because we didn't know for quite some time whether there was an underlying technical problem that had been the cause. Our entire team felt the shock and the sudden loss because it's a tightly knit team, so you knew each other. And we also offered psychological counseling and support. And so suddenly the soaring success had turned into a valley of despair. So after many clearances or by several authorities who investigate plane crashes and also several Siemens internal audits, etc., which clearly established that there was no technical malfunction. We also had a camera on board, and imagine that little chip was found, and you could reconstruct the whole film. So when that was established, then things started to move forward again. Of course, inspiring the team, which had been at that time just above 100 people already, to continue with this pioneering initiative. Just to give you a feeling of the accomplishments, I would like to highlight 3 of them. We started out with a 45 kilowatt motor. The one which I had flown in on the video, so that was yet the first version. And within 3 years, the colleagues developed the 70 kilowatt one, first the 55 and then the 71. So the 71 did not only generate 2/3 more output, but it was smaller and even lighter. Yeah. So that is just shows where innovation can take you if you are just kind of constantly looking at things, what you can improve. A second achievement, which I find mind-boggling, was that the inverter on the aircraft, which weighed 10 kilograms, they were able to reduce it to 900 grams. So this is more than 90% weight reduction. And especially in the case of aircraft, weight and naturally safety are extremely important considerations. Mm-hmm. And now coming more to invention, if you so wish, it last but not least, more than 40 patent applications were filed, of which almost 10 have been already granted. So it shows that in this innovation, we were also, or my colleagues were also able to really find new things which take us a step forward. So in 2019, however, Siemens decided not to take the step from electrification to electric aviation itself, and accordingly decided to sell this activity to a trusted partner who had also already been part of the initial Airbus cooperation. And by the end of 2019, by September 2019, this activity was sold to Rolls-Royce, strengthening Rolls-Royce's team, developing electric and hybrid aviation. Also, we had a hybrid variant. And the whole reason for this is because one aims to reduce significantly the CO2 footprint and also noise pollution. So these are two very important elements why this electrification is so important. And here, then I would just like to highlight 4 takeaways. Gorev, if you just could go one further, please. So the one is try, and try again. It is one of my standard encouragements, if you so wish. I don't say never give up. I find never give up, honestly speaking, wrong. But you should try and try again. And if you know why you failed, then you just try to reach the same aim a different way. This little story sounds quite nice. So you have the dinner here and a dinner here, and then everything happens. And then suddenly you have even a setup which can create some things which haven't been done before. But I can assure you we had many, many attempts in trying to attract more interest for the opportunities which we had in Hungary. So also one of my aims was to have a shared service center here in Hungary because it would strengthen our base, and that never materialized. And then, of course, when this aircraft story came up, then of course that was even more value than a shared service center, a regional shared service center. But it was, if you so wish, so good that we had to hand it on, and it was sold to Rolls-Royce. So at the time, I told my colleagues, if we think that we have 1% chance of getting something done, then we have to try 120 times to have a fair chance of realizing one. So it does pay off to try and to try again. Perseverance and persistence are very, very important. The second one is luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Many people have said that. Supposedly the first one is Seneca, who died in 65. Actually, he was asked by Emperor Nero at the time to commit suicide. So, because yeah, he had some thoughts which he didn't like then at the time. So, indeed, we at the time were technically prepared because of our inverter little group. Then also the previous qualification of the technological head of this group, and then we had this opportunity that this Dr. Frank had started this project, of course, before the in ramping up the Airbus thing, and therefore that also a certain amount of secrecy was necessary, and our little group here in Hungary was ideal for that. So it's just like that you need a seed which can drop onto a soil which is sufficiently humid that the little seed can start, and a small plant can come of it. But as we all know, once it has sprouted, it is not enough. You still need the environment so that it continues to have enough water and sunshine to grow. And in this case, this was possible. But I think very important is to have a positive mind frame. So be prepared for something good to happen. I think this is, I like to emphasize that, because if you just have a negative view of the surrounding world, and this doesn't happen and this doesn't work, then you will not be open to new ideas. And as we all know, if something, for example, doesn't work, that you can also look at it and say, well, this is an opportunity to look at the improvement side, what you can do there. And build relationships with valuable and interesting people. And I think this is especially a good topic for AIESECers. I've been invited to be a mentor, and as well, and we have. You can see that people then come up and say, and I would like to connect to this one and to this one because he is so important or so beautiful or something like that. This, I think, is not the right approach. If you have built relationships with valuable and interesting people, these people will remain valuable and interesting. Some of them will become maybe more valuable. Some will become more interesting, and some will become less valuable and less interesting. But then you have a good pool of people who you can encourage. They will encourage you, positive energies. And I think if you have those, and I think AIESEC is an excellent framework for this, and I believe that we will need such relationships even more in the future and not less. And we have technology which enables us to connect now. I just spoke to my Chinese teacher who taught me Chinese in Taiwan 43 years ago, and now she had her 90th birthday, and I could speak to her via the screen. So I think this is really something which gives value, where we can then connect and strengthen each other. And I think the surrounding with COVID, etc., I think this even adds additional value. Okay, but with this, I would like to move on now to purpose. Purpose is something which should go beyond just an immediate objective. And purpose should be something which should create a positive impact. Purpose should be there for the common good. And I repeat, for common good. Because in today's environment, we too often see that the common aim is something rather negative. People are being encouraged to be against something or someone or a political grouping or whatever it might be. Yeah, I consider these as centrifugal and rather destructive forces. And I think we should focus on doing something for a positive result. This is what I consider as purpose in a meaningful sense, which creates meaningful impact. Now, to return a little bit to the world of technology, technology with a purpose. The term technology with a purpose is also used by Siemens. And one of the main purposes, for example, is energy efficiency and safety using automation and digitalization. So I think it is very important that you have especially if you work for a company for such a long time, you have this feeling that you are doing something with a purpose. And especially in my case, I must say that the company allowed me to do things like what you mentioned, the sustainability. I can assure you that green roofs was not the main interest of Siemens back in the 90s in a brownfield environment. So, and of course also this vocational training. These are things which increase purpose, and technology with a purpose is something which is absolutely doable. And as I also mentioned, this electric aircraft, when you look at it and say that it will use hopefully green, well, I will still come to that, reduce the CO2 footprint and also noise. Those are two very, very important improvements and give this whole development a purpose. So maybe yet one thought is the question arises whether you have innovation first and then look for a purpose, and then ultimately for a profit, or do you start with the intent of increasing profit and then look for a purpose and then try to innovate accordingly? Well, as we know, there is no clear answer to this, and there is no real beginning and no real end to this wheel, which ideally goes forward and is in the interest of many of us. Creating and shaping things and processes which may be cheaper, faster, more reliable, lighter, smaller, or whatever is being considered as an improvement. And all of this only makes commercial sense if there's a reasonable profit, and it is reasonably likely, if a reasonable profit is reasonably likely within a reasonable time frame. And the question, which I won't answer, is what is reasonable. However, Gorev, when we went through this briefly, encouraged me to dwell a little bit on what I consider to be reasonable. Well, in a particular case of this electric drive, there's a definite element of that electric drives are a definite element of future aviation. So therefore the purpose, the aim is very well defined. And in most instances, it's the first one who sets the tone, at least for a certain period of time. And time is not only a valuable factor, but it is also merciless. Maybe just to show how important this is, I think many of you are following Tesla with an annual physical output of about 5% of the Volkswagen Group. And it is nevertheless 10 times more valuable than the entire Volkswagen group. So a valuation gap of 20 times 10, this is a factor in excess of 200 or 20,000%. So this looks like irrational exuberance, a phrase you might remember or have maybe read it in your textbooks, but it just shows how valuable it can be to be at the forefront. So therefore, the consideration of timing is a very relevant, a very relative one, naturally also a relevant one. But in this particular case, I just want to show you that you can then break it down into what I just said here, 3 phases or so, because undoubtedly the larger all-electric airliners are still, at least to my mind, 15 years off from or in the future. And to illustrate this a little bit in more detail, there are, of course, intermediate steps, because the aircraft which you saw was targeted mainly to train pilots, because they mainly require short takeoff and landing cycles. And then you can just exchange with a battery pack. Training flights with no local CO2 emission and at reduced noise levels is something valuable, and you can take this as the first step. The next step is certainly hybrid system. When you have electric takeoff and landing, and you have an optimized charging during the flight, ideally with green hydrogen, for all those who know the differences between the forms of hydrogen. So, and then after that, you have then the next step, which when even larger aircraft will become feasible. But honestly speaking, this will mainly depend on more advanced battery technologies, which will have a much higher energy density and significantly less weight. So what I just want to say is, if you have a big target like that, then you just have to break it down to make it more reasonable, just to revert to you, Gaurav. So in closing here, I would, of course, like to close with purpose. And I know that you, especially we all as AIESECers, can add to some common purpose for, as I mentioned, for a good cause. And honestly speaking, that does not necessarily need to be an innovation. It's just good if it's something, yes, it's good if it's something good for a good cause. And now we come to the last slide, Gaurav. I look forward to your questions. If you don't have any, then we can have a little game here. You can look where I doubt you will recognize one of my colleagues, but you can look for me there on that slide as well. But I do hope you have questions. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dale. That was very, very, very interesting, especially your personal story, your takeaways. I think your takeaways were really, really cool, especially, you know, about luck and opportunity. You know, luck is where preparation meets opportunity. I'll always keep that with me. But I'm sure the audience has some more questions than I do. So I'll leave it out to them for a couple of questions. Stefan will probably go through the chat. If ever anyone wants to speak, we'll give the person who wants to speak preference. If your questions are in the chat, then Stefan will sort them out and ask Dale those questions for you.
Just looking at the chat here now.
Yes.
Can I start first with some?
Absolutely. Please introduce
Ladies
yourself.
first.
Thank you so much. I'm wondering, how did you deal with the moral critic or ethnic critic with the accident in 2018, and also to proceed the project and continue to make the third amazing version?
Yes, well, thank you for the question. Well, first of all, what you have in such a situation is you have a freeze, right? Everyone is frozen, so to speak, because you don't know what happened. All you know is that you have this very obvious tragedy. So the first time span, you have to concentrate only on the human side. I mean, you had I mean, these people, the two who passed away were very close to the others in the team, because if you have such a success story, everyone interacts very intensively. So it is a personal loss. So you have a combination, you have a personal loss, and then you have the question mark, did we do something wrong technically, which then questions the whole thing. So, and of course, then you have these both negative negative factors, which create even more, even larger question mark. Then you just have to start working. Working means on the personal side, what I mentioned with the psychologist, start to confront the situation and do that. And then of course you have the technical side, where you have everything in it from the what is the authority, the aerial security authority or so, up to police. Yeah. Then of course you have immediately you have some colleagues from Germany, from Siemens, flying in, doing their own investigation. And then what happens is, of course, you had a high-flying success and everyone enjoyed it. But then if you have this situation, then you have suddenly many people, well, we had our considerations, and was this done correctly? And please prove that this was so. So, you know, it's just, this is why I also share this, because it just goes up and down. We also, honestly speaking, these 100 people this is the main project, but there were also some other smaller projects. So they then focused on those, yeah, because you cannot not do anything for almost a year. So that's also very important, that people then just move on with it. And as it has become, it became quite early on, it became evident that most likely there was a human error in this. Maybe here I can expand. So you had the pilot and you had the second person there, and the second person was a qualified pilot, but he was there to learn how to fly this aircraft, because we wanted to have many more tests, and we had already several aircraft there. So, and as you have a trainer, a flight trainer, he was able to take over the control. And this is what the real pilot allowed him to do that. And he took a too sharp curve. And of course, this plane is not, with this kind of motor, is not done for that. And then it suddenly didn't have the uplift anymore. And once you don't have the aerodynamics anymore, boom, this is what happened. So as then the people knew that you have the personal tragedy, but the technology might be okay, yeah, this also helps a little bit. It doesn't help very much, I can tell you. But had the mistake been more in the technology, that, I don't know, there was a major problem in the drivetrain, the battery supply or so, this would have taken it somewhere else. So I think what you have to do is you have to be, of course, considerate, yeah, emphasize the human side, but at the same time, allow the people to move on, in this case with other projects. Otherwise, you just, yes, well, you have to move on if there's a basis for this. And this requires balanced leadership. And I must say, this gentleman who heads this group, the one who said, why don't do it this way, is not only a great technician, yeah, a great person for technology, but he's also a great human being and a great leader. Yeah. So we did this together, but his contribution on the human side was really very valuable. And he also had another colleague. It is just a good team. It's a very valuable team. And in situations like this, these qualities can be felt, and that is also what takes it then to the next step.
Thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone else? Stefan, any questions in the chat box?
Yep, so we have a question from David. So Dale, did you have any misgivings about the sale to Rolls-Royce? Like, for example, were you concerned about their vision for the project? Would it differ from your own?
Hi, David. Well, personally, I was not happy about this, I can tell you. Yeah. Why? Because, of course, this project is a very visible one, a high-flying one. And I mean, it is somehow brings together the more modern the wish of having less CO2 footprint, less noise, with one of the original dreams of humanity to fly. Yeah? And bringing this together very visibly, having a plane where you have the Hungarian flag on it. This was very, very good for us to attract people, to make our brand more exciting in Hungary, because it just, you know, we were creating something. So I must say this is, for me, this was not good. Back in September 2019, I said, however, this is good for the group, because within Rolls-Royce, that is their main objective, aircraft propulsion. And that therefore, in the case of Siemens, it was something interesting, which started out because we have a record-breaking motor concerning weight and power output, not the one which, and that one that was developed in Germany, and the one which we did was a smaller version with at less cost, because this record-breaking one is just commercially not viable. So for me, this was not good as a CEO. For the colleagues, it was, I think, the right step forward, because you have the full focus on this. Now, just to go one step forward, this was September 2019. And we know that in 2020, one of the first things which stopped were flights, intercontinental flights, yeah? And Rolls-Royce, of course, has that focus. So Rolls-Royce as a company is now in a very difficult and different situation than it was in September 2019. Nevertheless, the entity in Hungary is doing relatively well. Also, some of the other little projects which I had mentioned to the lady AIESECer, hi, that also came to fruition. So they're doing relatively well, which is good. And overall, I think this is the right step. Although personally, for me, in Hungary, I lost, if you so wish, my flagship.
Cool. Thank you so much for the question, David. Maybe one last question, since we're, I think, 10, 12 minutes over time.
Yeah, so we have one more question from Say. Sorry if I don't know how to say your name. But they were asking that leadership is an important aspect that contributes to the success in innovation. And so what is your summary on the key elements you have experienced during your leadership journey?
Okay, I can simplify it and say I was just lucky. I already mentioned the personal properties of this head of this department, yeah. And I would say I would like to maybe emphasize one aspect, which is cooperation. So this colleague, the technical colleague, and within Siemens, but many other companies, you have a CEO and a CFO working together. And in this case, we had, for this entity, we had the two gentlemen, those also who were at that dinner when the whole thing happened. They worked together very well. Yeah. and they still work together very well. And also I am, yes, if you so wish, lucky that my CFO and I, that we work together very well. But just to give you a little tiny story yet, my CFO, because I worked, I was, before going to Japan and Slovakia, I was a CFO in Hungary. And my present CFO liked me so much that he wanted to leave the company because of me. He just didn't really, he didn't really share my views, and I was a little maybe too difficult for him. So he wanted to leave the company in '99, and I asked him to stay on, maybe also hinting that, whoops, I will be leaving anyhow. Yeah. And then when I came back 10 years later, we became really a very good team. And if we have this cooperation and this trust at this level, so my CFO and me, and we can mirror this with a technically competent team lead and a very energetic CFO within that group, who again also strengthened each other. That is something really valuable, and which now you can attribute it to luck or maybe to some other elements. But leadership is, at the end of the day, very much depends on the human quality. And if people under you sense that there is distrust, that you don't have this also this reliability, yeah, this gives also, if you have this reliability, this strengthens the whole system, especially if it is shattered, like in the case of such a tragedy or something like that. So this is when this, if you so wish, this resilience really comes out. And therefore, I wish all of you that you have a great business partner you can rely on.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dale, for answering some questions. We do come towards the end of our Regional A Talk. Before you guys leave, of course, I'd love if some of you, if all of you actually, could fill out the feedback form. So as you can see, you know, the link is up on the screen. So please, you know, please get onto the link and fill out the feedback form. And Stefan has also put it in the chat, if I'm not mistaken. Before you all go, we'd love for Stefan to take a group photo for all of us, so that we can put it on you know, on our social media channels as well. So I think I will stop sharing, if that's okay. Of course, I'll just quickly stop sharing. Awesome. So yeah, Stefan, over to you. And after we take the group photo, of course, I'll put up the link to the feedback and the last slide as well.
Cool. So everyone, if you can turn on your webcams if you're able to, I'll take the photo now. So I'll count down in 3, 2, 1. All right, amazing. Thank you, everyone. I'll give it back to you, Gaurav.
Awesome. Thank you, Stefan. Let me just share the feedback form. Yep, this is the feedback form. If you filled out the feedback form, you're more than welcome to leave. But again, thank you everyone so much, and thank you, Dale, so much for this amazing presentation and insights from such an experienced and qualified professional like you. I am 100% sure that everyone you know, took something away from this conversation. I did, for sure, and you know, I hope that this continued cooperation, this cooperation continues on, you know, for a long time.
I thank you. All the very best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Dale.